Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. I'm Rob Penzak, a physician-turned-writer and the creator of YourGods.com. And to my left is Rick Wingrove, head of Beltway Atheists and Capital Area Director of American Atheists. Since this is our first show, we thought we'd begin by introducing ourselves and explaining why we're so eager to become involved with Road to Reason. Rick, you want to start things off?
Sure. Hi everyone, and welcome to our very first show. I'm Rick Wingrove. I'm the Capital Area Director of American Atheists and the founder of Beltway Atheists Incorporated. I'm also the creator of FlameWarrior.com and AtheistinAmerica.com. American Atheists is the oldest atheist organization in the world. 2013 marks their 50th year in operation. It was formed by Madeleine O'Hair after her landmark 1963 Supreme Court decision, Murray versus Carlette, which removed state-mandated prayer from the public schools. American Atheists' primary focus is on separation of church and state, but they are also focused on the advancement of science and the protection of the civil rights of atheists. Science is our one and only methodology for the discovery and validation of what is real. It is a stringent method for asking hard questions about reality and figuring out what is true and factual. And I think the facts matter. They're all that matter. I think the Constitution is the most important document ever penned by man. I think that our Constitution guarantees freedom from religion as well as freedom of religion. It's not a guarantee that I must or will respect your beliefs, but only your right to have them, until and unless I can talk you out of them. Our Constitution is a firewall against theocracy. Religion must always be opt-in and never opt-out. I think, like Bertrand Russell, that religion is false and therefore harmful. And I think the evidence backs that up. I think that religion is obvious mythology from the Bronze Age, devised by people who thought the earth was flat and that there were witches. I think religion would have died out a long time ago, except that the European churches literally had a license to kill people like us for most of the last 2,000 years, simply for raising our hand when they asked the question, are there any atheists in the room? This show will discuss all these topics and more as we explore in depth what it means to be an atheist in America in the 21st century. And I am happy to be here to take part in this exploration. Rob, what's your interest and how do you find yourself involved with this show?
Well, I'm happy to be here too, and for me it's mostly about promoting social justice and trying to create a more humane society, which isn't what organized religion has ever been about. And as to being an atheist, the first thing I'd like to say is that I don't hate God. I simply don't believe in him, or her, or them as the case might be. Nor do I harbor any antipathy toward the madmen and monstrosities who strut the pages of the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Hindu Vedas, the Iliad and Odyssey of the Greeks, the Prose Edda of the Norse, or any other mythological frameworks. Indeed, I gave up the practice of medicine because I was fascinated by such stories and wanted to start writing my own full-time, using the medium of fiction to examine the human condition. Which is to say, I'm not averse to telling tales, and I understand that whole cloth fabrications can even go beyond entertainment and convey some deep moral truths. As a former physician, though, with an undergraduate background in molecular biology, I never confused fantasy for reality. And even as a novelist, I never mix up the worlds I create for my books with the tangible one we actually live in. But there are many amongst us who are unable, and perhaps an even larger contingent that's simply unwilling, to distinguish fact from fancy. Those who see their particular sacred texts not as the metaphorical constructs that Joseph Campbell spent his life exploring as a student of comparative religion, but instead as the literal if unlikable and the inerrant if incoherent word of an omnipotent deity. Though I should note, before going any further, it doesn't necessarily take a bolt-hurling sky god to cloud the eyes of a true believer. It could just as well be the ideological certainty that whites are a master race, or that laissez-faire capitalism is the best way to lift up the masses, or that communists are plotting to destroy a civilization and must be rooted out from beneath their rocks. Really, any passionately held conviction can suffice to drive an agenda, just so long as the believers adopt it as their bedrock frame of reference, unimpeachable by evidence, no matter how voluminous or convincing that evidence might be. Of course, outside the human ranks, evolution takes a rather dim view of any organisms which fail to account for their actual environment, either through willful belligerence, a neurological deficit, or some combination thereof. This is why zoos have no problem collecting vampire bats, which quietly feed on the blood of mammals, while their fabled cousins, the genuine soul-sucking vampires, are practically as hard to fetch as unicorns, which take their supernatural sustenance not from grass and oats, but from the love of beautiful maidens. Getting back to humans, though, our species has long shaped its environment in ways that other animals simply cannot, and that's opened the door for a special breed of charlatans who would divorce cause from effect and conflate the imaginary with the actual so as to carve out a niche for themselves and their chosen sects. As for those outside the fold, I suppose heaven would hardly be heaven if heathens could we call it home, right? My point is that all of us should have realized our country was in trouble when Karl Rove derided the journalist Ron Suskind as a member of the reality-based community, which would fritter away its time in the judicious study of discernible facts while Rove's boss, George Jr., the ultimate prodigal son, with voices ringing in his head like a late-to-the-table schizophrenic, was hard at work creating new realities, albeit fictitious ones, with the other great actors of history, which reality-based pundits and journalists would soon begin studying judiciously, as was their habit, even as the next cycle of Genesis got underway. Actually, I think it was clear we were in trouble some years before that, when the politically partisan and religiously stacked Supreme Court blocked a state-ordered recount in Florida in order to make sure that the right rights trumped the wrong rights, and that the right voters didn't have their votes diluted by the votes to the voters on their left. And this wasn't just catch-22 irony, though as an aside, stalling a recount as a prelude to precluding a recount, since there was no longer enough time for a recount, would certainly have tickled any itch that Yossarian, Major, or Joseph Heller could have imagined. But this bit of judicial overreach was far more sinister than the usual tit-for-tat brattiness of politics, and sharper edge than Washington's frequently fuzzy math. This morsel had a totalitarian flavor, and in order to swallow it, one would have to engage in full-blown Orwellian doublethink of the 2 + 2 = 5 variety. Or more to the point, one would have to live in a country where cognitive dissonance, if not the norm, was at least a frequent enough flyer for a large segment of the population to have become very much at ease with its presence. And here in the newly minted Inertia, where money has become deemed equivalent to speech and patriotism to the presence of a flag on one's lapel, and where self-absorbed chicken hawks routinely paint actual veterans as cowards, and where vast swaths of otherwise bright people would sooner think of the Earth as a 6,000-year young pancake than a 4.5 billion-year-old globe, here in that troubled America, such cognitive dissonance is flourishing. Thus, courtesy of the court courtesans and a wealth of eager dupes, we found ourselves taking one bold step away from our democratic principles and one giant leap toward the chomping maw of America's first theocratic regime. A notion, by the way, that isn't just being espoused by wayward atheists and tree-hugging liberals, but was perhaps best said by former Lieutenant General William Boykin, a Christian fundamentalist who proudly declared that Bush wasn't elected by a majority of voters, he was appointed by God. God in this case working not through his usual mysterious means, but through the more conventional use of well-placed connections such as his Opus Dei devotees on the highest court in our land. Of course, one could trace religion's intrusion into the political arena further back if they like, say to the unseemly union between Ronald Reagan and Jerry Falwell, back in those heady spit-swapping days before trickle-down Ron sold the middle class down the river, while ignoring the blossoming AIDS epidemic to boot, leaving all those nasty queers to reap what they'd sown, and before the good Reverend Jerry explained how feminists and those same resilient homosexuals had involved God's wrath in the form of Hurricane Katrina. Or was it 9/11 they'd been responsible for? Anyhow, as the theocrats took over, reason yielded to rhetoric, nuance to hyper-nationalism, and righteous zealots began hammering away at the wall separating church from state. And that, by and large, is why I jumped at the chance to get involved with this show, because I think reason and common decency can lead us to a much better place than any form of religious orthodoxy. And like most free-thinking secularists, I understand that our founding fathers didn't construct the wall between church and state on a lark, and that they would be rolling over in their graves if they could see how today's fundamentalists were twisting their deistic beliefs into a supposed charter for a Christian America. Rick, I know you have some pretty strong feelings about the separation from church and state. Maybe you can tell us how those tie into the nativity battle you had in Leesburg recently.
Yeah, first let me say, beautiful statement, lots of vivid imagery in there, so thanks for that. Yeah, separation of church and state. There are three things you got to remember being an atheist. There are three important things. First one is separation of church and state. Second one is separation of church and state. And the third one, I forget what it is. But let me tell you what's going on in Leesburg and a little background. In 2009, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Grounds Committee ran a study and decided that they were going to ban all the displays from the courthouse lawn. There had been a nativity on the courthouse lawn for about 50 years, I guess. Anyway, they were going to ban all displays, and this was because they wanted to save the historic trees and the historic lawn instead of it being trampled down all the time. So they made that suggestion, and there was an immediate uproar from the local Christian community over this unconscionable attack on their religion. So, which it never was, of course. But the Board of Supervisors predictably caved right in and decided to let the nativity scene back on the lawn. But they did a weird thing at that point. They actually called and talked to the ACLU. The ACLU instructed them of Supreme Court decisions which required them, if they are creating a public forum by letting people, any group on the lawn, then they got to let other people on the lawn, and they can't censor them based on content. So they, at that point, decided to open up 10 spots on the lawn, and that first year we quickly grabbed a spot, got one sign up, and that was basically a nativity.
And this was a sign attacking religion?
It attacked religion not at all. We never attacked anybody's religion or their right to practice religion. We were trying to keep it focused on separation of church and state. Well, we only got that one banner up that year. The following year, we got 7 of the 10 available spots on the local atheist community. Same thing in 2011. We got 7 of the 10 available spots and put up a lot of banners. And of course, this irritated a lot of people, especially the Board of Supervisors. And in following Christmas of 2010, we started putting up a display on the lawn every month for the calendar year of 2011. So we had one up every month, and this really irritated them. The last one we put up was a Christmas banner that said, peace, love, health, and happiness to all. It had a Christmas tree on it.
So you really attacked them. I also heard that you put up the one with Santa Claus's skeleton. I was wondering why you guys went nasty.
Well, that wasn't us. The young man who put that up, very nice young man, I've met him, self-identifies as a Christian. And he put that up as a commentary about the crass over-commercialization of Christmas, which is something that you would think Christians and atheists could agree on. Not so. And that display, this skeleton Santa in a red suit on a cross, was immediately vandalized. It was vandalized in front of a Channel 4 camera, an NBC affiliate camera, and a sheriff's deputy. The sheriff's deputy threw up his hands and walked back in the building, saying he wasn't going to get involved in that. This was played on television. The woman was located, and she was actually spoken to on camera. Nothing ever came of that. They accused us, and they used that against us in the following year. They changed the rules. They were still going to let the Christian displays be on the lawn, no matter what, whatever they had to do. So they put up a menorah, and they put up a plastic Santa. And this satisfies what's known as the Santa rule, which says that the nativity scene, this readily identifiable icon for Christianity, becomes secular if you stand a plastic Santa beside it.
It's a convenient rule.
That's kind of funny. Santa has the power over Christianity to make it secular, which also brings up an irony. You can actually, by permit, I can put up a plastic Santa on the lawn anytime without a Christian display, but you can't put up the Christian display without the plastic Santa. So anyway, this year they changed the rules, and basing it on our putting up the skeleton Santa, which we did not do. So they changed the rules. They're giving the Christian displays privileged access that we don't have. They've made it where they can leave that display up 24/7 for as long as they want to. And our access has been whittled down to we have to be present.
Which is a little inconvenient for your members who have to work or
very
have other
inconvenient.
lives.
People have jobs, people have lives. So obviously we can't keep a display up 24/7. So it's a huge inconvenience, and it does what they intended it to do. It makes it hard for us to put up displays. So they did this all to settle this once and for all. They did anything but settle it once and for all, and I'm sure there'll be more action in the future.
You mentioned the commercialization of Christmas, which you think both sides can agree on. What do you think about the kind of money in religion and how you see churches have these very special rules that they had some problems with the IRS that you addressed?
Interestingly, American Atheists just in the last week has filed a lawsuit against the IRS. They're suing them over special rules under 501c3 that give churches an easier pass. There are things that they don't have to do, the rest of us do. For instance, Beltway Atheists Incorporated is a 501c3. We had to fill out certain paperwork. We had to do everything by the numbers, and it was a waiting period. They get certain things okayed automatically and instantly. And they have some of the provisions under 501c3 for churches just aren't available to any other groups at all. So we're suing them over that, and we'll see where that goes. But that's brand new. That just happened in the last week.
Are you worried, though, that that kind of action is going to pull some of that money out of, the whole church system, and therefore reduce the amount of helpful sex education that churches can do, and scientific teachings in schools that they're trying to do?
I'm not sure I understand your question, to tell you the truth.
No, I was just kind of saying that the churches accumulate vast amounts of money, obviously.
Yes, they do.
That instead of putting it into the very helpful things that religion is supposed to do, like taking care of the impoverished,
Right.
teaching people things they need to know, they kind of wield this money to elect political candidates that they want, and to put out a lot of misinformation in
Right.
all sorts of fields.
I see what you mean. Yeah, they are very active in politics, and that should also have an impact on their tax-exempt status under 501c3 rules. However, nobody seems to be enforcing that. And in the last election cycle, it's just like all the rules were off. The gloves were off. And you could see the effect of the extremist right, the fundamentalist and the evangelical right, and their control over the Tea Party and the Republican Party. They were flexing their muscle, throwing their weight around, and it was pretty scary for a while. And the way they went after women, of course, the misogyny there, going after not just abortion, but birth control.
Right, and like you said, that misogyny really dates back to the Bible and the Bronze Age. And,
And it shows how illogical their approach is on a lot of what they do. If you want to have less abortions, let's have no condoms and no sex education.
We
know
what do you
how
think
that
what has
works.
the science kind of showed on the abstinence-only studies? Has that been as big a success as the religious right would?
Well,
kind of think?
you're a doctor, so you know how well that works.
Yeah, I mean,
not at all.
Right, it doesn't work at all, and the hypocrisy in that they force the abstinence-only, knowing that it doesn't work, knowing that it's going to lead a lot of women to get pregnant, denying them the education that could then could prevent them from doing that, and then say, and now you have to raise the child, and we're not going to help you with it. It seems to fly in the face of the Sermon on the Mount Christianity, at least.
Well, a lot of what they do flies in the face of what the Bible says, but the misogyny is some of the worst. And they basically, misogyny is biblical. Let me say that. And their control over women seems to be something that they feel entitled to do. And it brings up the spectacle, the Congressional Committee a few months ago addressing birth control for women, and the fact that there were no women at all on this panel. There were 5 men, probably, I think 3 of them were clergy. So, and one was a Catholic priest, who is the last person in the world that knows anything or should be addressing sex or vaginas or birth control or abortion.
Yeah, well, sure. Right here in Virginia, we've got new legislation being kind of snuck in that's going to end up crippling abortion clinics, if not legally shutting them down. And then so you're going to have another whole group of women that either have to go outside the law or have to suffer for what the religious right decided the law should be.
Well, naturally, the result will be more abortions. So, yeah, they can't outlaw it because it is a constitutional right. They just make it impossible to get. So, yeah, the misogyny is just built into the religion.
Yeah, I've always had a hard time understanding how so many women can go into that evangelical mode without seeing how harmful it's been to them.
Right.
And I don't know how much that has to do with indoctrination as a child. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit, I think. How many people do you think would become, if you take out marriage and you're changing religion because you want to marry somebody that's required by their religion, how many educated teenagers in their skeptical phase would buy into religion if they weren't, didn't have it inundated when they were 2 and 3?
Well, that's it, I suggest that, and I've seen this suggested other places, it's not original, but don't impose a religion on a child until they're at the age of reason, until they're 18 or even 21. And I bet you have a lot less people, a lot less adamant about religion when you do that. It's this indoctrination of children. Everybody understands what that's about. If you get a child, you'll have the man, and that frequently works. It works on a lot of people, not on everybody. A lot of us escaped it, but.
Yeah, but I mean, if Christ and the Bible and all the religious books really are supposed to be the pathway to the truth, you would think that truth and facts, like what you said, it's fairly obvious that if you take a child that's evolved to trust their parents so that they don't, they don't get hurt before they know what they're doing, you prey upon that little 2-year-old's mind, and there's nothing they can do.
Well, teach them to think before you teach them religion, and they won't buy religion.
What do you think in terms of once they do get a little bit higher up and they start teaching creationism in schools? Does that seem, if you take a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old, that's fine to put it in there, or how should that be balanced, with the alternate theory of evolution?
Well, creationism, God, we could spend several shows just talking about creationism. But creationism...
Well, let's talk about intelligent design instead.
Intelligent design, creationism repackaged to slip it under the constitutional radar, except it doesn't work.
Right.
Creationism, as it was recognized in Dover, the Dover decision, it is religion. It is creationism renamed, repackaged, literally. And so it was deemed unconstitutional. And before that, there was a Supreme Court case, the name eludes me right this second, but this was a Louisiana case, 1987, I believe, which outlawed the teaching of evolution in the schools because it is religion. And what they said in Dover was, religion is what religion does, basically. I'm channeling Forrest Gump. That's essentially what they said. So, but they keep trying to teach this in under the guise of science, acting like it is science. There's nothing about it that's science. But they are trying to supplant the actual science with the religion, calling the religion science and calling the science fantasy.
Right. That's a lot of my interest really is not just what an individual religious person thinks, but how this affects the entire society. There's an interesting book, Merchants of Doubt, that talks about how they use this term of junk science and wield it against real science, and then they make it like you have 2 equivalent arguments. And my concern is that the religious right, when they team up or side with either moneyed interests or certain kind of ideologues, suddenly has enough voting power to kind of inflict their worldview on everybody else. So religion automatically spills over instead of just how they want to live their lives into how you need to live your life.
Right. And religion remains strong. In spite of recent gains, and we are gaining. The number of non-religiously affiliated in the general population is now north of 20%. Under the age of 30, it's north of 30%. And as with education, with affluence, religion seems to evaporate more. There's less adherence to religion the more somebody is educated and the better off they are in life.
So how do you make that jibe with the fact that we have no presidents, no senators, and almost no congressmen that don't believe?
Well, there was one out atheist in Congress, Pete Stark. He's just left Congress, but we have a new religiously unaffiliated person, ironically from Arizona. Kirsten Sinema, something like that. And they say to keep an eye on her, but slowly but surely, and that's not to mention the people who are in there who claim to be religious, they're just lying.
Right, out of those hundreds and hundreds, if 20 or 30% of the rest of the educated population are non-believers, you think there must be a few of those that are...
Yeah, some of those people in there are just lying. They're atheists, but they understand you need to profess Christianity. There is a de facto religious test.
Right, it becomes actually an ethical question. Do you tell the truth? And then you can't possibly get into politics, and then you can't possibly help shape a better world.
Right.
So do you just have to fly under the radar?
Well, we're seeing that slowly but surely change.
I guess we could also try to figure out what we'd like this show to become, in the upcoming months. Right now, this opening show, we're just kind of having a dialogue between each other about some interesting topics that concern us. I guess we'd really like to get a lot of input from the viewers.
We would, and I think sometime in the future this may be a live call-in show. So that'll be interesting, and we will welcome phone calls and input at that time and try to answer them. And plus, we'll be having some very interesting guests on the show because we just happen to live in a place where there's a lot of atheist activity going on, and not just atheists, but skeptical groups and humanist groups. The headquarters of most of these organizations, national organizations, are here.
Right here.
So we will have access to that.
Right, we'll also have Elizabeth Cornwell from the Richard Dawkins Foundation is going to be a regular host on the show.
We
Excited
hope
about
we
that.
can, we hope we can get Dr. Dawkins on here, and I'm hoping that we can get David Silverman, the new president of American Atheists, on here. Plus, there's the Military Atheists and Free Thinkers. I'd like to get them on here. Center for Inquiry locally, get them in here, and just tons of other people. A lot of heavyweights around here.
Yeah, I know there's a congressman that ran in Virginia as an open atheist, and had he was at one of our writing shows and had a very difficult time, I think, getting started. And so, yeah, I'd love to see if we could get him to come kind of talk about his experience, as he was also a physician who had spent his life trying to help people, but as soon as, he just spoke as a rational person, it was kind of over.
Plus, we're going to touch every subject. What I found out a long time ago, when I first got online, when I got my first computer, got online, this was before there actually was an internet. There were bulletin boards like CompuServe. And I went on there looking for atheists, and I found lots of atheists, and they were ready to talk, they were ready to come out, and they were ready to battle the Christians.
Yeah.
And so the forum was basically a lot of back and forth between Christians and atheists. And that has, at one time, there were like 60 people on there when I got on there. Now there are thousands,
right.
and that's just on one board. And get on the internet anywhere, and you're going to find millions.
Sure. Have things changed a lot from when you were first getting into the movement and your friends would realize, oh my God, he's an atheist? And now how people react, is it sort of more acceptable, or you still get a lot of shock factor that a nice guy like you could be an atheist?
Well, I've always been pretty open, and I never really encountered a lot of pushback.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, some, but not much. How was your experience with that when you came out?
I think anybody who knows me has known for quite a while, my beliefs, but I was never particularly involved in the atheist movement. It's just my own personal business, and if somebody wanted to believe that was theirs. And I think it was when probably Bush was coming into power that I realized it wasn't just some fringe element of society that had, very strong biblical views and wanted to shape the nation's agenda based on those. And so, after that, and then after the re-election, when it wasn't that people made this mistake, they still, half the country felt that way, it became a lot more important to me to, talk about people about taking a rational approach.
All right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up now. But we want to thank everybody for watching the show, our very first episode. Go to Facebook and look us up, Road to Reason. And we're opening up a YouTube channel. But if you go to the Facebook page, there's a phone number there. You can call us in. You can leave up to a 3-minute message, and we'll maybe get it on the air and talk about that. So give us something to talk about, and might get it on the air.
All right,
So,
thank you for watching.
thank you for watching.